hits the airwaves, it's going to transform people's opinion about the CIA and the depths to which CIA will dive to collect intelligence that protects Americans. So one of its own officers became a spy, reporting our secrets to a foreign adversary. My wife and I were included in an operation to bait the mole, to make a mistake so that the mole could be found and disclosed.
Your wife is here today, and you've never told this story before, have you?
No. And your curiosity right now is a major issue with CIA because they don't want the world to know who those people are. It's a dangerous game.
Well, obviously my research team tried to figure out who it was. So was this the mole?
Married CIA spies Andrew and Jihi Bustamante were tasked with unraveling one of the greatest intelligence operations in modern history.
Their untold story shows you how to build trust, manipulate, and thrive under pressure.
What actually happened?
A foreign ally contacted CIA and said, you have somebody inside your organization sharing information on operations, officers, assets to an enemy country. They deployed us to the country and crafted new identities, new aliases, so that we could build new sources of intelligence and try to find the mole.
And we were really successful in doing that.
Nobody felt like they were in imminent danger, but then that changed. My presence in the enemy country became known. I called G and said, I'm coming home early.
And from that, I knew that something was wrong. Because it is very real that you can be disappeared by a foreign adversary.
Or worse, being captured. And the president can plausibly deny that you're CIA. So I had to try to escape the country, but everything went wrong.
And what happens next?
A horrible story. So
this is to figure out which country Andrew and Jihi were undercover in as spies from what they say, but also our team here figured out that the mole in the CIA was one of these three people. Can you figure out from what they say which person was the mole? It might make sense for you at this moment to screenshot these three faces and the details below so you can remember their profiles. And by the end of the conversation, I want you to comment below which country you thought Andrew was undercover in as a spy and which one of these people was the mole within the CIA. Let's do this. Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like it when I ask you to subscribe at the start of these conversations. I don't like saying it, I don't like it being in there, none of us like it. It's frustrating. Do you know what's also frustrating? It's also frustrating when I go into the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that listen frequently to this podcast haven't yet subscribed. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed because... Andrew, you've never told this story before, have you?
no, I have never told the story of my own operational background. It's been something that CIA has forbidden for a long time.
And what's written in this book has taken you a long time to get approved by the CIA.
Correct. So all CIA officers sign a lifetime secrecy agreement. And that secrecy agreement gives CIA the right to approve or disapprove any operational elements of our background that are still classified and that fit under this very kind of narrow rubric of sources and methods of active intelligence collection. Because of my time at CIA, my work at CIA, and the sensitivity of that work, I just kind of assumed I would never be able to talk about it. And then all that changed with the first Trump administration.
What was the CIA's response when you said that you wanted to talk about what you're going to talk about today?
Well, that's what's interesting. They had two different responses. When I first submitted the request in 2019 to CIA to write about my operational background, we went through kind of some normal bureaucratic back and forth, and they ultimately said, yes, you can write about it in detail. And then in 2021, when we submitted the manuscript and it was complete, the world started to change. In 2022, multiple major issues erupted between major adversaries of the United States, and CIA came back and removed their previous permission. They basically said that in light of current geopolitics, everything in the book was now reclassified.
How did you get the CIA to change their mind so that you could release this book and talk about what you're going to talk about today?
We engaged with an attorney, one of the top attorneys in the space of classified information and publishing information. So the attorney believed that because of the effort that my wife and I had put into the book, CIA would back off. And ultimately, that is what they did. When we threatened them with a First Amendment lawsuit, they came back and said, we don't want to go down that road. We think we can collaborate on this. We'll approve your book and you can move forward.
Why do you think they didn't want you to publish this book and this story to get out?
When this story hits the airwaves, it's going to transform people's opinion about CIA in two big ways. First, they'll understand that CIA is not what the movies portray it to be. It's not superhuman spies who go out there like James Bond or Jason Bourne, who are one man against the world. That's not how espionage works. Espionage is a team sport. You have wins, you have losses. The second thing is they'll start to understand the depths to which CIA will dive to collect intelligence that protects Americans. Inside this book, we talk about a mole that actually penetrated CIA that CIA has never acknowledged. Inside this book, we talk about new tactics that CIA learned from terrorism and then used against our own most strategic adversaries. I don't think people recognize that CIA is morally ambivalent to how it executes espionage operations. The goal is to keep Americans safe.
When you say in this book, you disclose that there was a mole within the CIA, what does that mean for someone that doesn't know what a mole in the CIA is?
One of the worst things that can happen to an intelligence service is that one of its own officers becomes a spy for a foreign adversary. That is what I'm referring to when I talk about a mole.
And you were involved in that operation to find the mole within the CIA?
Correct. More specifically, my wife and I were included in an operation to kind of ferret out the mole, to bait and tempt the mole to make a mistake so that the mole could be found and disclosed.
And your wife is here today?
Correct.
And we're going to bring her in and talk to her as well. But for anyone that doesn't know your backstory, which would be pretty remarkable seeing as you've been on this channel now a few times, could you give me a whistle-stop tour of your professional background up until the point that you met Jihi?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from a rural place in Pennsylvania. Was like the only brown kid in a white high school. But I ended up going to a military academy. I went to the Air Force Academy. And from the Air Force Academy, I go into the Air Force. The Air Force teaches me how to fly. They teach me a foreign language. And then they teach me about nuclear weapons and nuclear missiles. And I serve as a nuclear missile officer in the Air Force. So CIA picked me up. And in my first day on the job in CIA, that's the day that I met my wife. She was sitting in the back of the classroom. I, of course, worked my way to the front of the classroom. And from there, our training just kind of overlapped and we became close.
Well, Jihi is here, so I'd like to hear her version of events. Was there any inconsistency in the story he told? What was your perspective? There's always another perspective. And are you allowed to date in the CIA?
Oh, yeah. It's encouraged because it's really hard when you're keeping so many secrets to date somebody outside of the CIA and not be able to tell that, because we had friends who did that. You have to keep your whole life secret. So you're lying to them about where you're going and what you do. And
Day to day.
Day to day, every single day. So you're building a relationship and lying all the time. And it's really difficult. So if you date within the CIA, if you're in different divisions or whatever, like maybe you can't talk about everything in detail, but you at least know what's going on. You know why somebody's going TDY or where they're going for a training session. Or
we can explain to each other, like, hey, I'm going to go work with the Spanish. I'm going to go work with the Canadians. But when you're dating somebody on the outside, you can't say those things. So it becomes, I'm going on a business meeting. I'm going on a trip.
Crazy.
And we've had many friends who have had relationships explode or melt down because the partner starts to ask very logical questions. We had one good friend of ours who was an outsider who was dating one of our good friends who was an insider. And she pulled me aside one day and she was like, he goes on all these business trips, but he never takes any suits. She's like, I think he's cheating on me. And I was like, no, he's actually going to a tactical training course where you don't need to wear anything except BDUs, but I can see your concerns. So you have to walk there's a lot of walking people off a cliff because they start to come to the wrong conclusion about what their actual partner is doing.
Jihi, what's your journey into the CIA?
mine was kind of an unexpected journey because I went into social work, working with survivors of torture from other countries, with refugees, with asylees. But before I got that job, I'd spent my entire last year of grad school going to job fairs. And what I really wanted was to work for the federal government, for like the larger mission for the United States, for like the people of the United States. But then nobody was calling me back. And I was like, okay, I'll just submit an application, like an online application to C.I.A., which I thought was funny. And then a few months later, I got a call back. She was like, come to the information session. So I went in like a random hotel with these like nondescript signs outside, and you walk in and you're like, I don't know if I'm in the right place. And then they close the door and they're like, welcome to the CIA recruiting session. And you're like, oh, this is so bizarre. And
Did they tell you what your role is? Because I know there's several different roles in the CIA.
targeters began during the War on Terror. And because what they initially did was target individuals for capture or kill for the military.
Okay, so what does that mean? They targeted people for capture or kill for the military. So you would find the person to capture or kill in a foreign country.
Yes. And so because, everybody else is doing their job of, logistics or weapons or fighting or strategy. So the targeter position was really important because it takes time to go through all this data to piece together this puzzle of who is important to capture, who's important to kill, and how do you get to them? The how do you get to them is the piece that everybody else wants to know, but they don't really have time to do that and their other jobs. So they carved out this targeter role so one person can do all this research and identify. And terrorists were really fascinating because they had how their organizations were structured. And so you really needed somebody who could look, it's like targeting the mafia, right? Everybody has a role. There's a big organization, everybody has a role. It is in your favor if you're going after them to find out who's connected to who, how can you get to different people? Because you're never going to be able to just get the top person right away. So how do you get there, right?
And you became a targeter.
Yes.
So your job was to figure out who to capture and kill.
Or capture or
kill.
And what was your role in the CIA? How is your role different? Can you explain it for a layman?
Yeah, so where Jihi was trying to find the individuals that were of interest, my job was to learn what to do after a targeter identified those individuals. How do you actually meet the person? How do you befriend the person? How do you win their trust? How do you collect their secrets? What's known as a field officer, an operations officer, a case officer. Those are the different terminologies that we use internally. But you essentially have every case is kind of handed over from person to person. So raw information, sometimes open source information is handed to a targeter who creates a profile, a dossier, a targeting package, who hands it to an operations officer who goes out and actually makes that first contact. And then when first contact is made, we pass all the information back and it goes back to all the same people to build the next package for the next target.
So Jihi would identify the individual and then your job was to fly overseas, go undercover, and make first contact with that individual to extract intelligence from them.
And not at first. By the time that CIA started utilizing us as a tandem couple is a term that means a married, truly married, CIA-trained couple. When we started becoming a tandem couple, that's how we were a 1-2 punch for operations. Prior to that, we were in separate offices and separate divisions doing separate work. So we got along and we were complementary because I understood the challenges of her job and she understood the challenges of my job, which made both of us better working with our counterparts in our different offices.
So where does the story begin, Andy? You wrote this book to tell a story. So I'm asking you the question. Usually I'd hazard a guess where to start, but where does this story begin?
From my perspective, the story really starts on I think it was a winter day when we were both called in to a counterintelligence office that was a massive oak table. It was a senior executive leadership type of room, but there were only 3 people there. It was she, it was me, and it was the leader of what's known as Falcon House, which is this group of specialists inside of CIA focused on one particular adversary, an adversary that we've had to codename Falcon to maintain confidentiality with CIA.
And so Falcon is a country, basically.
Falcon is a country, correct. And that leader revealed to us that they believed there was a penetration, a mole, that was inside of Falcon House, inside of CIA, and that they needed us to agree to do an operation so that the mole will make a mistake here. Because if the mole makes a mistake here, we'll find him. But we can't have you be here, because if you're here, the mole will find you. And then we don't know what happens if the mole finds you. So we're going to send you across the world to go work in this other country, Falcon being the country, while we here as the experts in Washington, D.C. try to find the mole. And that was privileged information that neither of us as junior officers ever thought we would hear. And I know for me, I was kind of giddy with excitement, and he was a little bit more apprehensive with, this can't be real. But for me, that's where the story starts, is when these two people, with her anxiety disorder and me with my kind of lackluster CIA career, when we got pulled into this office that was clearly outside of our league and invited to do this operation, without that first meeting, Shadow Cell would have never happened.
Most men don't.
Without that first meeting, Shadow Cell would have never happened.
So from that moment onwards, how long was it before you flew to the foreign country in question? And what was your objective when you got to that foreign country? So I guess it's like a sub-objective to find the mole. And there was another main objective, which was going to help find the mole?
You're using great terminology. There were primary objectives and secondary objectives. And the primary objective was to build a new set of reporting assets, a new source of intelligence, several new sources of intelligence in Falcon, the actual country. And to help you frame what Falcon is, there's only a handful of countries that are true stark adversaries to the United States. Every one of those countries has limited to no diplomatic relationship with the United States. That's how hostile they are. Any one of those countries could be Falcon. The reason that we have to code name the country is because CIA in today's geopolitical world has demanded we don't disclose the name of the country. So we call it Falcon.
What are the United States adversaries where we don't have any relationship with them? There's also like North Korea, there's Russia, there's Iran we know of. Are there any others?
Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a mix there of countries that we do have a relationship with, but it's not a warm relationship, versus countries we have no relationship with. So we have no relationship with North Korea. Mm-hmm. We have a cold relationship with Russia, right? We have a cold relationship with China. We have no relationship with Iran. Mm-hmm. So they're all considered hard targets, but of various levels.
Okay. So the primary objective is to build a new team in this country. But the sub-objective is, in building the team, you're going to find out, hopefully, who the mole is, because the mole is going to make a mistake.
The mole's going to try to find us, because the mole's job is to prevent CIA from collecting secrets about Falcon. Because the mole is working for Falcon intelligence.
The mole is working for that country.
Yeah.
Right.
The mole is part of the CIA, but working for the adversarial country.
Mm-hmm. Bingo, which is the worst combination you can have. So some of the most famous moles in history are Aldrich Ames. Aldrich Ames was a CIA penetration that worked for the Russians. Robert Hanssen was an FBI penetration that worked for the Russians. So these are famous moles in history. We were essentially being told that these earth-shattering 1990s era moles were still relevant, but now in 2010-ish, there was a new one that had made its way into CIA, and that's a big deal. So it was a very exciting reveal for me, because it meant that we were not just doing something that was relevant and interesting inside of CIA, we're doing something that is quite possibly the most important work that can be done inside CIA at this moment in time.
How did the CIA know there was a mole?
There's a lot of complexity there that is part of why they didn't want us to write this book. Mm-hmm. But what they have allowed us to disclose is that a foreign ally contacted CIA and said, we have collected intelligence that suggests you have a mole. You have somebody inside your organization who's a turncoat, a spy for somebody else. So a foreign ally warned CIA. Otherwise, CIA would have had no idea.
Okay, and foreign allies are people like the United Kingdom,
Canada,
Australia.
So you can imagine the disruption that would make. Not only did CIA proper not know they had a mole, it took an ally to tell us. And then when the ally told us, we have to assume that the ally is sharing as much biographical detail as possible. So they're telling you the name. Hey, Bob is a spy in your organization. But now that CIA officer is an American citizen, protected by American rights and privileges. And CIA obviously has no information to show that that person's a spy, except for the word of some foreign ally, which is still, in the eyes of the US government, a foreigner is a foreigner, ally or not. So even if it is the UK or Canadians telling us so-and-so is a spy, until we have our own body of evidence, we can't prosecute. That person can't be fired. That person can't be discharged. That person can't be sued. That person can't be arrested. So now CIA has this mess where they are actively losing information, actively losing intel.
Because of this mole.
Because of a mole, but they can't take any action because they have to now build a legal case against the mole to prove that that person's actually breaking the law.
So the ally that calls the CIA and says you've got a mole in your ranks, they named the person.
Most likely they would have never made the notification without also sharing the name, which is a courtesy we do to others as well. If we come across information that we know an MI6 officer has been compromised, or a Canadian CSIS officer has been compromised, or an ASIS officer in Australia, we will share as many biographical details as possible.
And did you share the name? When you were called into the room that day, did they share the name with you?
No. It's hard for people to wrap their minds around the culture at CIA. And I get it, because how do you wrap your mind around an organization you don't know? And the only insight is from movies. So culturally, CIA is a group of people who value secrets. And that need to know is very important inside those walls. It's just something we toss around like movie jargon outside. But inside CIA, need to know is very, very real. And you are only briefed to the minimum that you need to know. So inside of this tiny group of spy hunters, which is known as the Counter-Espionage Group, CEG, inside this very small group, they have the need to know basically everything. And then as you go out in rings from that group, they reduce the information they share. So they might know the name, but then when they share it to the next ring, they just say, hey, there's an officer who's in this office. And then it goes to the next ring, there's an officer in this division, and then it goes to the next ring. So the people talking to us as senior leaders, the people talking to us knew the minimum we needed to know was that we were going to build new operations, but we were also going to be most likely targeted by a known threat inside CIA. That was why it mattered to us. Interestingly, that decision is why we had a First Amendment case with this book at all, because CIA was knowingly putting our lives in danger of a foreign adversary by intentionally creating operations that would tempt that mole to disclose our identities.
That was one of the things I was thinking when I was reading the book is you knew that you were being sent to an adversarial country, and you also had the knowledge that working amongst you was a mole who was revealing secrets about the CIA and potentially yourselves to that foreign country.
Correct.
So that foreign country could have killed you.
Absolutely. And that's the second kind of cultural element that people don't understand about CIA. Mm-hmm. You don't really turn down an operation. If you're invited to take part in an operation, you have the right to say no. But if you say no, you're committing career suicide. Ji-hee, and anybody who reads the book will find this out, Ji-hee was a stellar officer on a phenomenal trajectory, doing incredible things, kind of really charting the course for what targeters have become today. For me, I proved to be a not very good case officer. And if there was anything I was really hoping for, it was a second chance. So when we were pulled into this meeting and they said, hey, here's this exciting opportunity, here's an operation that we're literally inviting you into this executive suite to invite you to this operation. And we're going to put you together and we need you to do this. That's not a situation that I was going to say no to. I think you considered saying no. But for me, they knew me well enough to know I was not going to turn that down.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have anxiety, you consider saying no to everything. You're always thinking about the risk. But I think that...
What was the risk that you were thinking about?
It is very real that you can be disappeared by a foreign adversary, that you can be, killed by them with no explanation, that you can be just put in jail and then you never get out because the government's not necessarily going to come to your aid. And if they do, it might be 20 years before you're out of their prison.
Every sworn officer has plausible deniability, meaning the president can plausibly deny that you don't belong to whatever organization you are claiming to belong to. So a CIA officer arrested in a Russian prison can avoid all questioning and say, hold on, guys, I'm actually CIA. You caught me. Good job. Now please send me home. Don't have a diplomatic incident. The president has the right to say that person is not CIA.
Yeah.
That person has never worked for me. I don't know who that person is. That their American passport might be verified, but but they are legally in your possession of legal requirements. So we don't really know who they are.
So just to clarify then, you were being told you were going to be flown, both of you, to a foreign country, an adversarial foreign country, and you were told that there was a mole amongst your ranks that was feeding information to the foreign country that you were being flown to.
So they actually stationed us in a neighboring country that was friendly. But we knew that Andy and anybody we worked with would have to go into Falcon. So they flew us to a country.
Falcon being the adversarial country.
The adversarial country. So we actually lived in a third country called Wolf, but we were operating in both Wolf and in Falcon. So the danger was still there.
And then that's when Jihee's targeter mind set in. And that's when she started thinking through, well, how could our operation be reverse engineered by Falcon and actually find us? And if we can think like the enemy, we can stay one step ahead of the enemy. So the whole idea of going to Wolf and building our team from the very beginning, Jihee started to architect how we could do that in a way that would foil our aggressors from being able to even discover our existence.
And what was the objective so you've got this sub-objective, which I understand, which is to find the mole, but the main objective is just to spy as usual and collect information on this adversarial country?
Yes and no. The main objective was to collect information, but the spying as usual is the part that was a no. CIA specifically told us they didn't want us to do the standard spy MO. Spying has really been the same since the days of Egypt, the ancient Egypt, right? You find somebody who gives you information about something that they have access to, and that's it, and that's spying. And then you turn it into a report, and you pass it up to somebody who reads it, and they make a decision. They wanted a new kind of mousetrap. They wanted a new way of doing espionage. And when they deployed us to the friendly country, that was their only request, was whatever you do there, coordinate it with the local leadership, and then don't tell us, because we have to make sure that the mole doesn't learn what you're doing. That's going to be how we tempt the mole to start probing around and asking questions that are outside of the norm. That's how we're going to reverse engineer this and find the mole. So we need you to go do something new, and we need it not to be standard.
And don't tell us.
And don't tell us, but tell your leadership in the friendly country.
Your CIA leadership in the friendly country.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
And he's going to tell or she's going to tell them?
No. So it's completely compartmentalized. So
Need to know.
Right. Because if we kept all of our operations centered in Wolf, then in our friendly country, then the mole would never know what we were doing. So we would be gathering intelligence, which would then be further compartmentalized to maybe a specific office where like one or two people at headquarters might know about one particular operation, and then one or two people might know about another operation. But it's because not all of Falcon House would know, the mole would not have access to any of these new intelligence sources. And that's what was really important. That's why they wanted us to rebuild, because he currently had access to all of the legacy intelligence sources.
Okay.
And so if he wanted to, pass any information to Falcon from all of our legacy sources, he could. But if he doesn't have access to our new sources, he can't pass any of that new information on. And now here we are, we're able to gather more intelligence. And then hopefully, if we're lucky, we strike gold on finding out who he is or who he's working with or other things. But yeah, compartmentalization is the key. So we were really very, kind of siloed in Wolf.
I'm trying to understand how you doing what you were doing was going to help the CIA discover who the mole was.
One of the things in double agent operations, which is what you're talking about when you talk about a mole or a penetration, a double agent, meaning I'm a sworn officer of CIA, but then I've also agreed to work with the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Cubans, whatever. That's a double agent. Double agent operations are very difficult to maintain long term, because if my information isn't relevant to my foreign adversary anymore. If I'm collecting secrets on Cuba, but I'm being paid by the Russians may not care that I keep collecting secrets on Cuba, so they might cut me off. And then all of a sudden I'm a double agent, culpable of crime, but without protection from another country. So when you think of your Edward Snowdens, when you think of some of your famous turncoats from the United States, they flee to the country that they were working for, ultimately. So if you don't have that escape path, then it becomes very, very stressful and scary for a double agent. So what CIA was counting on is the mole who was reporting our secrets to Falcon. If we could create new operations and that mole didn't have access to those new operations, then the mole would start to stretch. They would start to make mistakes, ask questions they shouldn't ask, steal information, try to hack onto systems they shouldn't get onto. And that's all stuff that CIA can use to build a legal case to arrest that person.